What happens when the calm, charming face of Hollywood finally loses his composure? Live on daytime television. When the cameras rolled on The View that morning, no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. The studio audience had come expecting laughter, a few witty jabs from the hosts, and maybe a charming story or two from Ryan Gosling. Instead, they witnessed a confrontation so tense that it left the entire room frozen in disbelief. The morning felt ordinary at first. The lights above the set glowed a soft amber, illuminating the panel of familiar faces behind the long desk. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair, flashing that sly grin that often preceded her sharpest remarks. Beside her, Sunny Hostin thumbed through her cue cards and Whoopi Goldberg sipped her tea, visibly relaxed. The audience buzzed with anticipation. They were there for one reason, Ryan Gosling. Fresh off the success of his latest dramatic role, he had been making the rounds on talk shows, winning hearts with his usual humility and charm. As the theme music faded and the cameras focused on him, he entered to thunderous applause, his trademark shy smile lighting up the stage. At first glance, there was no hint of the storm that would soon erupt. Ryan sat down between Whoopi and Joy, shaking their hands politely. His eyes scanned the crowd for a brief second, a flicker of nerves, perhaps, before settling into the conversation. "Ryan, first of all, congratulations on the movie," Whoopi said warmly, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "Thank you," Ryan replied with a modest nod. "It's been a wild ride, but I'm grateful." The conversation began lighthearted, touching on the challenges of preparing for his intense role and the grueling months of training he endured. The audience laughed at his anecdotes about messing up during rehearsal scenes, and Joy cracked a few quips about his on-screen brooding, drawing polite chuckles from Ryan himself. But then the mood shifted. Joy, always known for her provocative questions, leaned forward with a mischievous spark in her eye. "You know, Ryan," she said, her voice carrying that teasing edge that often bordered on confrontational, "people say you take yourself a little too seriously these days. That you're, kind of a Hollywood diva now. What's that about?" A ripple of surprise passed through the audience. The air changed. It wasn't an innocent question. The way she said it, the slight smirk on her lips, felt more like a jab than a playful tease. Ryan's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but for those watching closely, the shift in his expression was unmistakable. "I'm not sure what you mean," he replied slowly, his tone even but slightly strained. Joy didn't miss a beat. "Oh, come on. We've heard the stories. The demanding schedules, the script rewrites you wanted, the long silences on set. People wonder if maybe all that fame's gone to your head." The studio went eerily quiet. Even the audience, accustomed to the occasional sparring on The View, sensed they were venturing into dangerous territory. Ryan shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around the armrest of the chair. For a long moment, he said nothing. His eyes locked onto Joy's with an intensity that made her lean back slightly, as though she'd just realized she'd pushed too far. "Those stories aren't exactly true," Ryan finally said, his voice low but steady. "You know how rumors work in this industry. A lot of things get twisted." Joy shrugged, feigning innocence. "I'm just saying what people are saying. Isn't it fair to ask?" Something in Ryan's composure cracked, barely visible, but there. He gave a short, humorless laugh, the kind that hinted at bottled-up frustration. He said, "I came here to talk about the movie, about the work. Not to defend myself against gossip." The audience murmured. A few gasps rose from the front rows. The tension was now palpable, like static electricity building before a lightning strike. Joy crossed her arms, her smile tightening. "Well, Ryan, if you can't handle a little tough question, maybe." "Maybe," Ryan interrupted, his voice sharper now. "People like you should think twice before throwing labels around on live TV. You don't know me. You don't know the work I put in. And it's easy to sit there and take cheap shots." A wave of rolled across the audience. Whoopi shifted in her seat, her eyes darting between Ryan and Joy, clearly contemplating stepping in. But Joy wasn't ready to back down. "Wow," she said, raising her eyebrows. "Look who's getting defensive. I'm just doing my job, Ryan. You're in the public eye. People have opinions." Ryan's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening as he leaned slightly forward. "Opinions are fine. But when you spread rumors as if they're facts, you're not doing your job. You're just stirring up drama for ratings. I've worked for decades to be taken seriously as an actor. I'm not going to sit here and let you tear it down with cheap shots." The room held its breath. It was no longer a casual daytime talk show segment. It felt like a scene from a courtroom drama. Every word charged with tension, every reaction magnified by the cameras and the silent audience. Sunny Hostin finally broke the silence, attempting to defuse the situation. Okay, let's all take a breath, she said gently, raising her hands. We're here to celebrate Ryan's work, not. But Joy cut her off. No, I think this is interesting. We're just having a conversation. I didn't realize Ryan Gosling was so sensitive. Ryan's eyes flashed. The charming Hollywood star the audience thought they knew was gone. In his place sat a man whose patience had reached its breaking point. You call it sensitive, he said, his voice firm and unwavering. I call it standing up for myself. I'm tired of being polite while people like you try to paint a picture that isn't true. The audience erupted, some gasping, others clapping, a few even whistling. The energy in the studio had shifted completely. Whoopi stepped in at last, her voice calm but firm. All right, let's take it down a notch, everyone. This isn't the way we want this conversation to go. But Ryan wasn't finished. His gaze stayed locked on Joy, his words measured yet laced with emotion. You know what's funny? I came here thinking this would be a good conversation, that we'd talk about the craft, the art. Instead, I feel like I walked into an ambush. If that's what daytime TV is now, just taking swings at people to get a headline, then maybe we need to ask ourselves who's really lost touch here. That last line landed like a thunderclap. Even Joy's confident expression faltered, just slightly, as murmurs swept through the audience. A low, steady camera zoom captured Ryan's face. Not angry in the wild, shouting sense, but intense, resolute, the kind of expression that made everyone in the room feel the weight of the moment. As the show cut to a commercial break, the studio was abuzz. The audience whispered to one another in disbelief. The hosts shuffled in their chairs, avoiding each other's eyes. And Ryan, he sat still, his shoulders tense, staring at the desk as if replaying the entire exchange in his head. But this was only the beginning. When the cameras cut to commercial, the illusion of control on the set shattered like glass. The familiar upbeat theme of The View faded into the background, replaced by the low hum of whispered conversations and the rustle of crew members moving swiftly across the stage. Ryan Gosling remained seated, shoulders squared, his gaze fixed on the mug of coffee in front of him. His fingers traced the rim of the cup absent-mindedly, as if grounding himself in the simplest of motions. The lights above dimmed slightly, but the heat in the room was undeniable, a tension that clung to everyone present. Across the table, Joy Behar leaned back in her chair with a practiced air of nonchalance. But the slight tremor in the way she crossed her arms and the tight set of her jaw betrayed the fact that the exchange had rattled her more than she wanted anyone to know. Producers huddled near the edge of the stage, their whispers urgent and clipped. One of them, a wiry man with a headset clamped tight against his ear, glanced nervously at Ryan before murmuring something to a colleague. This was not the kind of drama they wanted, or maybe it was, though they wouldn't admit it out loud. From the audience came the soft murmur of speculation, little gasps and hushed tones that carried through the otherwise quiet studio. A woman in the third row leaned toward her friend, eyes wide. Did you see his face? I've never seen Ryan Gosling look like that. He looked furious. Her friend shook her head, still clutching the edge of her seat. I thought he was going to walk off. In the brief moments off air, Whoopi Goldberg reached across the table, resting a steadying hand on Ryan's arm. Hey, she said softly, her voice low so only he could hear. You don't have to let it get to you. Just breathe, all right? We'll steer it back once we're live. Ryan didn't look up, but his jaw unclenched just slightly. He nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement of her effort. Joy let out a small laugh, not loud, but enough to draw attention. Wow, she muttered, glancing at one of the producers. Guess I struck a nerve. Didn't think the golden boy would lose his cool. Ryan's head turned at that, slowly, deliberately, until his eyes met hers. The intensity in his gaze made Joy look away after just a second too long. I didn't lose my cool, he said evenly. I just stopped pretending. Before anyone could respond, the stage manager raised her hand. Back in 5-4-3. The red light blinked on. The show was live again. The audience straightened in their seats, collectively holding its breath as if aware that the tension hadn't truly settled. It had only been paused. Whoopi picked up the thread of conversation, her tone measured, attempting to guide things back to safer ground. Welcome back to The View. We've been talking with Ryan Gosling about his latest film, and clearly it sparked some strong feelings here today. The camera panned to Ryan, who sat upright, shoulders back, his expression calm but guarded. Joy, however, wasn't done. She offered a tight smile, her voice carrying a faint edge of sarcasm. Strong feelings are good. It means we're having a real conversation, not just another Hollywood PR tour. A murmur of anticipation rippled through the audience. They could sense it. The line had been crossed once, and it might be crossed again. Ryan leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table, his voice calm but with a quiet force that carried across the studio. A real conversation is honest. It's about the work, the story we're telling. It's not about repeating rumors that tear people down. That's not journalism. That's not even good TV. The audience erupted in scattered applause, surprising even some of the hosts. Sunny Hostin tried to jump in. Let's focus on the film. But Joy wasn't letting go. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing just a fraction. You keep saying it's about the work. But you have to admit, the stories about your behavior on set didn't just come out of thin air. Are you saying everyone's lying? Ryan's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a warning. I'm saying, he replied, his tone sharper now, that the stories people hear are often exaggerated or flat out made up. And when someone with a platform repeats them as if they're true, it sticks. It shapes how people see you. That's why it matters. Joy gave a short laugh, but it rang hollow. You sound like you're blaming the media for everything. Isn't that convenient? Ryan's hand curled into a loose fist on the table. He wasn't shouting, but there was a restrained power in his voice that made the room go still. I'm blaming anyone who spreads lies for the sake of a headline. There's a difference between asking hard questions and throwing mud. You know that. The audience broke into applause again, this time louder, mixed with a few whistles and cheers. Whoopi held up a hand, her expression stern now. All right, let's keep this respectful. We're not here to tear each other apart. Ryan's here as a guest, and we should remember that. For a moment, it seemed like the storm might pass. But then Joy leaned back, a sly smile tugging at her lips. Respect goes both ways, don't you think? If you can't handle people talking about you, maybe you're in the wrong business. The words landed like a spark on dry tinder. Ryan inhaled slowly, his chest rising and falling as if he were steadying himself against the tide of emotion threatening to break through. His next words came measured, but every syllable carried the weight of his frustration. I can handle people talking, he said, his voice low but intense. I've handled it my whole career. What I won't handle is being misrepresented by people who should know better. I came here in good faith. I didn't expect to have to defend myself against gossip on live TV. But if that's the game you're playing, then fine. I'm done being quiet. The room seemed to hold its breath. For a long moment, Joy didn't respond. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of something else. Maybe surprise, maybe irritation. In the audience, someone muttered just loud enough to be caught by the boom mic. Wow, he's serious. The tension crackled like static electricity. Even the camera operators seemed to hesitate, unsure of whether to focus on Ryan's intense expression or Joy's defiant posture. Then, unexpectedly, Ryan leaned back, breaking eye contact and exhaling slowly. The storm that had built in his voice seemed to settle, though the undercurrent of frustration remained. Let's talk about the film, he said finally, turning to Whoopi. That's why I'm here. Whoopi nodded, seizing the opportunity to shift gears. All right, let's do that. Ryan's new movie is getting incredible reviews. The performance you gave, some are calling it your best yet. The conversation moved forward, but the undercurrent of tension lingered, like the distant rumble of thunder after a storm. Joy chimed in occasionally, her tone subdued compared to earlier. Ryan's responses were calm but clipped careful, as if he were walking a tightrope. But as the cameras panned across the set, the audience could sense it. The moment they had witnessed wasn't over. It had only paused, leaving behind a charged atmosphere that promised more was yet to come. And backstage, as the segment wrapped and the hosts prepared for the next break, whispers spread like wildfire among the crew. Did you see that? One stagehand whispered to another. I thought Ryan was going to walk off. Joy pushed too far this time. I don't know, the other replied. He held his ground. I've never seen anyone shut her down like that. This is going to be all over the news by tonight. Near the dressing rooms, Ryan's publicist paced with her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a hushed, urgent tone. No, it's not just a tense moment. It's going viral. People are already clipping it. Back on stage, as the commercial break loomed once again, Joy cast a sidelong glance at Ryan. There was no smirk this time, only a quiet, unreadable expression. Ryan adjusted his jacket, his face calm but his eyes distant, as though bracing for whatever was coming next. The audience sensed it too, leaning forward in their seats. They weren't just watching a talk show anymore. They were witnessing a moment that would ripple far beyond the studio walls. And when the cameras came back for the next segment, the tension would only rise higher. The third segment began with the usual upbeat theme music, but it felt hollow, almost out of place against the thick, charged air that hung over the studio. The lights seemed a little brighter, the audience's eyes a little wider. Everyone knew they were about to witness something extraordinary, and possibly explosive. Ryan Gosling sat still, his posture composed but his presence commanding. He was no longer just the guest promoting a film. He was the center of a storm, a man who had revealed a rare, raw side of himself. Joy Behar tapped her cue cards on the desk, her lips pursed as if rehearsing her next move. Her earlier confidence had dimmed just a notch, replaced by something sharper, the look of someone unwilling to back down. Whoopi Goldberg cleared her throat, her calm, deliberate voice guiding the show back into motion. We're back with Ryan Gosling. And, clearly, it's been a lively discussion. But let's get back to the heart of it, this incredible performance everyone's talking about. Ryan offered a polite nod. Thank you. That's what I came here to talk about. For a brief moment, the mood softened. Whoopi began asking about the preparation Ryan had undergone for his role. The months of physical training, the psychological toll of immersing himself in a character driven by loss and redemption. Ryan spoke with quiet focus, his voice carrying the depth of someone who had lived inside the role. The audience leaned in, captivated. They had almost forgotten the earlier tension, almost. Then Joy struck again. So, she said, leaning forward, her tone deceptively light. You went to all these lengths to get into character. But some say you've been living in that dark, brooding space a little too much these days. I mean, is this the real Ryan Gosling we're seeing? The one who can't take a joke anymore. The words landed like a stone thrown into still water, sending ripples through the room. Ryan's eyes shifted to Joy, and for the first time, the faintest trace of disbelief crossed his face, as if he couldn't believe she'd chosen to go there again. A hush fell over the audience. He spoke slowly, each word deliberate, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. You know, Joy, I respect people who ask real questions. But when you say things like that, when you try to reduce a person's passion for their craft to a punchline, you're not just being funny. You're being dismissive. And it's exhausting. Joy tilted her head, eyebrows raised in mock surprise. Exhausting? Come on, Ryan. I'm just trying to lighten the mood. We're on a talk show. We joke. That's what we do. Ryan's gaze didn't waver. There's a difference between a joke and a jab. You know the difference. I've worked my whole life to tell stories that mean something, to play characters that move people. And you want to sit here and turn that into a late-night monologue punchline. I'm not here for that. The audience let out a collective murmur, half gasp, half applause. Whoopi's eyes widened slightly. Sunny Hostin shifted in her seat, as if sensing they were teetering on the edge of a full-blown on-air showdown. All right, Sunny interjected with a soft, conciliatory tone. We can have fun and still respect the work. Maybe we just... But Joy cut her off, a note of irritation creeping into her voice. Respect goes both ways, Sunny. I've been doing this for decades. If an actor can't handle a little ribbing, maybe he's not as tough as he looks. The air crackled. Ryan's composure tightened like a drawn bowstring. His voice, when it came, was low, intense, and carried across the silent studio. You keep saying handle it like it's about being tough. But it's not. It's about decency. It's about knowing that your words can shape the way millions of people see someone. That's not ribbing. That's power. And with power comes responsibility. The audience erupted in applause, louder than before, with scattered cheers breaking through. Joy's expression hardened. Her practiced smile slipped, revealing the flicker of frustration beneath. Oh, so now you're going to lecture me on responsibility? That's rich. I've been doing this long before you were the heartthrob of the moment. I know my job. Ryan leaned in just slightly, his eyes unwavering. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe the job's changed, but you haven't. We live in a time when words spread instantly, where a single comment can fuel a headline and change a narrative. If we don't adapt, we're not just talking anymore. We're shaping people's lives, for better or worse. I've kept quiet about a lot of things over the years. But I'm done being quiet. A wave of gasps swept through the audience, followed by thunderous applause. Some even stood to clap, their faces lit with the thrill of witnessing a raw, unscripted moment. Whoopi raised her hands, trying to bring the energy down. Okay, let's keep this civil. We're here to talk about the film, not fight each other. But the genie was out of the bottle. The cameras zoomed in on Ryan's face, calm but fierce, his eyes glinting under the studio lights, and then cut to Joy, who sat stiffly in her chair, lips pressed into a thin line. The tension was palpable, humming like a live wire. In the control room, a producer muttered to another, "This is gold. We couldn't script this if we tried." Back on stage, Ryan took a slow breath and spoke again, his tone softer but no less firm. "I didn't come here to fight. I came here because I believe in the work I do, and I believe it matters. But if standing up for myself comes across as fighting, then so be it. I'd rather stand up than let my name get dragged around for sport." The studio audience erupted once more, their claps echoing through the set like a chorus of support. For the first time that morning, Joy didn't respond right away. Her eyes shifted briefly to the audience, then back to Ryan, as if weighing whether to push further or let the moment pass. Sunny finally stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "Maybe this is a good moment for all of us to reflect. We invite people here to share their stories, their journeys. Sometimes we forget they're people too, not just headlines. Maybe we can try to do better." The audience applauded again, softer this time, the mood in the room shifting from electric confrontation to something quieter, more reflective. Joy exhaled slowly, leaning back in her chair. "All right," she said at last, her voice measured, though her eyes still held a spark of defiance. "Fair enough. Let's talk about the film." Ryan nodded once, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Thank you." Whoopi seized the moment to steer the conversation back to safer waters. "So, Ryan, this character you play, he's been called your most intense role yet. What drew you to him?" Ryan launched into the story of the character's struggles, his personal connection to the themes of resilience and redemption. As he spoke, the tension in the room eased slightly, the audience leaning in once more, drawn back into the world of storytelling that had brought them there in the first place. But though the conversation moved forward, the memory of what had just unfolded lingered. The audience knew they had witnessed something rare, not just a celebrity promoting a film, but a man standing his ground, live, unfiltered, and unapologetic. And in the control room, the producers exchanged knowing glances. They could already picture the headlines, the clips that would flood social media before the day was over. Backstage, Ryan's publicist checked her phone, her face pale as she scrolled through a flood of notifications. Tweets, posts, and hashtags were already multiplying by the minute. Hashtag Ryan vs. Joy. Hashtag Gosling claps back. Hashtag The View Showdown. In the final moments of the segment, as the camera zoomed out for the wide shot, the audience could feel it in the air. The story wasn't over yet. The storm had passed for now, but its aftershocks were only just beginning. The final segment of The View that morning was unlike any the show had ever aired. Even as the closing theme played faintly in the background, and the hosts tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics. Fan questions about Ryan's movie, a funny anecdote about a scene gone wrong. The energy in the room never returned to normal. The audience remained riveted, their eyes fixed on Ryan Gosling, as if waiting for another moment, another unscripted flash of honesty. When the cameras finally faded to black and the director called, "That's a wrap," the studio didn't erupt into its usual cheerful buzz. Instead, there was a stunned quiet. For a heartbeat, everyone just stayed where they were, caught between the lingering tension and the realization that they had just witnessed something that would soon dominate headlines worldwide. Ryan stood slowly, adjusting his jacket. His face was composed but unreadable, the kind of expression that suggested both exhaustion and relief. He extended a hand to Whoopi first. She shook it warmly, offering a small, sincere nod. "Thanks for coming, Ryan," she said softly, her eyes kind. "It was quite a morning." He managed a faint smile. "Thanks for having me." When he turned to Joy, there was a pause, brief but heavy. Joy looked up at him, her trademark smirk gone, replaced by a guarded expression. For a moment, it seemed like neither would say a word. Then Ryan extended his hand. "Good conversation," he said simply, his tone neutral. Joy hesitated, then took his hand, shaking it with a short, almost curt nod. "Good luck with the movie," she replied. It wasn't exactly a truce, but it wasn't a war either. As Ryan made his way backstage, the audience broke into applause, a spontaneous gesture that carried both admiration and respect. Some clapped for the performance he had given in the movie. Others clapped for the performance they had just witnessed on that stage, a rare, unguarded display of authenticity. Behind the cameras, the producers were already huddled in a corner, their voices low and urgent. One of them, holding a tablet, muttered to the others, "The clips are already up online. We're trending. This is going to explode." In the dressing room, Ryan's publicist handed him his phone with a grimace. "You need to see this," she said. He glanced at the screen. Notifications were pouring in like a flood, each one a ripple in the tsunami building across the internet. Twitter hashtags were already in the top 5 worldwide trends. Hashtag Ryan Gosling, hashtag The View Clash, hashtag Joy vs. Ryan, hashtag Gosling Unleashed. Clips of his calm but fiery exchange with Joy were spreading across TikTok and Instagram. Some set to dramatic music, others slowed down for emphasis. Memes were popping up, split-screen shots of Ryan's steely stare versus Joy's raised eyebrows, captioned with phrases like, "When you push too far," or "Gosling doesn't play." A breaking news alert flashed across his phone from a major entertainment network. Ryan Gosling confronts Joy Behar in heated live TV showdown. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He had known it would cause waves, but even he hadn't anticipated the tidal force of it all. Elsewhere in the building, Joy sat in her own dressing room, staring at her phone in silence. Her producer knocked lightly before poking his head in. "You okay?" he asked carefully. Joy glanced up, her eyes sharp but tired. "I'm fine," she said curtly. "It's just another day. I do this for a living." But when the door closed again, she let out a long breath and sat back, staring at the headlines flashing across her screen. She knew this moment would follow her for days, maybe weeks. By mid-afternoon, news outlets were in full swing. Entertainment blogs ran headlines like, "Ryan Gosling stuns viewers by calling out Joy Behar live on air." "Tense moments on The View. Gosling pushes back against tabloid rumors." Fans applaud Ryan Gosling for standing his ground. On social media, the conversation was fierce and divided. Some applauded Ryan for standing up for himself and demanding respect for his craft. Others defended Joy, calling her comments fair game for a public figure. Twitter feeds lit up with opinions. Finally, a celebrity who won't let the media twist their story. Joy was just doing her job. Ryan overreacted. Best daytime TV moment in years. I felt that tension through the screen. That evening, as clips from the interview aired on late-night news shows, pundits debated whether Ryan's reaction marked a turning point in how celebrities engage with the media. A prominent entertainment journalist said on a panel discussion, "This wasn't just a celebrity losing their temper. This was someone saying enough to the culture of clickbait and rumor-mongering. Whether you agree with his approach or not, you can't deny it struck a chord." At Ryan's hotel later that night, his team gathered around a table strewn with laptops and phones. His publicist showed him the numbers. The interview's already got more views online than most episodes of The View get in a week. You've become a trending topic in over a dozen countries. Ryan leaned back in his chair, a weary smile tugging at his lips. "All I wanted was to talk about the movie," he said quietly. But maybe this was a conversation that needed to happen. By the next morning, the fallout had grown even larger. A well-known columnist wrote an op-ed titled, "Ryan Gosling versus Joy Behar. The day authenticity fought back against sensationalism." Clips from the confrontation were being dissected by body language experts on YouTube, analyzing every glance, every pause. Fans flooded Ryan's Instagram with supportive messages, some quoting his line about standing up rather than staying quiet. At the same time, Joy's comments faced scrutiny. Some viewers criticized her approach, arguing that the line between tough journalism and provocation had been crossed. Others defended her as simply doing what she always did, stirring the pot. On the following episode of The View, Joy addressed the moment briefly at the start of the show. "Look," she said, her tone brisk. "Sometimes conversations get heated. Ryan had his perspective, I had mine. That's what makes live TV interesting. We move on." But even as she spoke, the studio audience's reaction, a mix of polite applause and murmurs, showed that people were still thinking about it, still talking about it. Meanwhile, Ryan's interview clips continued to dominate social media feeds. Fans cut together montages of his calm but pointed responses, set to inspirational music, with captions like, "Stand your ground. Speak your truth." One viral tweet summed it up. "We didn't just watch an actor promote a movie. We watched a man reclaim his narrative." The confrontation became more than a celebrity headline. It became a talking point about the evolving relationship between public figures and the media. By the end of the week, Ryan appeared in a separate interview on a late-night talk show. The host, smiling, asked about the infamous View moment. Ryan chuckled softly, shaking his head. Look, I respect what they do. I've been on that show before and always had good experiences. But sometimes you reach a point where you just can't let things slide anymore. I wasn't trying to make headlines. I just wanted to set the record straight. The audience applauded warmly, and the clip went viral yet again, cementing the moment as one of the most talked-about TV confrontations of the year. Back in the studios where it all began, the crew of The View moved on to the next week's guests and topics. But the memory of that day lingered in the walls of the stage, in the minds of those who had been there to witness it live. For the audience who had watched it unfold, both in the studio and across millions of screens worldwide, it was more than just an interview gone wrong. It was a reminder that even in the polished world of daytime television, real emotions, real boundaries, and real consequences could still break through. As the credits rolled on this chapter of the story, one thing was clear. The image of Ryan Gosling sitting calmly, yet unflinchingly, as he called for decency in a world hungry for headlines would not be forgotten anytime soon. And now we turn to you. What do you think about this unforgettable live TV moment? Was Ryan Gosling right to push back the way he did? Or do you think Joy Behar was just doing her job as a host? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your take. And if you love hearing these dramatic, behind-the-scenes stories of Hollywood's most explosive moments, make sure to subscribe to Prime Narrator right now and hit the bell icon so you never miss another story that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Because in the world of live television, the next big moment could happen anytime.